This is iFanboy Pick of the Week 897, brought to you by iFanboy listeners just like you who, yes, are washing their hands and yes, wearing their masks. Please think of Josh. Hello, my name is Connor Kilpatrick, and sitting in for my co-host, Josh Flanagan, is Dr. Ryan Haupt. He's back.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me back.
It's been 4 weeks in a row of guest hosts. The unofficial Old Home Week, Old Home Month, as we go to episode 900, continues. And that's because, as we mentioned last week, Josh went out to have some fun and got COVID.
He's like the girl that has sex in the horror movie. Like,
yeah, he like me hadn't tested positive for COVID until this year. And he was convinced he was immune. Yeah, so he was convinced he was immune. He was not, and now he was like, I can still do the show. And then he completely devolved, as it happens, because this strain seems to get worse in the middle. But he actually was sick with COVID when we recorded the Booksplode, which is on the feed now. But he just thought it was a regular cold because he hadn't tested positive yet. But there's a lot of editing out of coughs and sneezes and blowing noses on that episode for me. Anyway, what are we? Oh, this is iFanboy Pick of the Week, episode 897. And let's talk about what we do. I don't even know what's happening right now. Every week, one of us picks the book they like the best from their stack of comics. It's a bigger stack this week than last week. We call that the Pick of the Week. We'll talk about that book, other books from the week, the Patron Pick. If we have time, listener mail. And spoiler warning, this is a review show. Exercise some caution. This week, Ryan, you had to pick, and you had a very, I thought, fun week. You always seem to be coming around on this is the DC week. This is the week where DC has
I tend to for the consistent two books for me, appearance to appearance, tend to be Nightwing and World's Finest. And we've talked before about like mixing up my appearance schedule a little bit, but I'm just like, no, those are two of my favorite books being published right now. I like talking about them.
But also Superman comes out this week, and now we've got Wonder Woman. We'll talk about that book in a minute, but let's talk about the pick.
The pick of the week was Superman number 6. No legacy numbering on the old Superman book.
DC's not consistent with that.
Written by Joshua Williamson, a new artist by Gleb Melnikov, but still with covers by Jamal Campbell and colored by Alejandro Sanchez and letterer Ariana Mayer.
As he's kind of, I was going to say he's kind of in the school of Jamal Campbell, but he's really not.
Well, that was the thought I had, because I saw the first page, which is a double page spread of Superman flying at the quote-unquote camera, and I was like, oh, is this Jamal Campbell doing something a little different? And I checked and I was like, oh, it's not. But I kind of see like the way he kind of proportions Superman as a lunk.
Yeah, he kind of has that. But I feel like he's more in the school of Ed McGuinness. Like if you look at that second page after the double page spread, like that Superman looks a lot like an Ed McGuinness Superman.
Yeah, where he's holding up the truck and where he's leaning up against the Lois's office door. Very Ed McGuinness. And sort of Ed McGuinness is also kind of like exaggerated, like hands. Hands and chins and things like that. So I actually didn't love the transition in art at first, but as I read the issue, it grew on me, and I was like, oh, I'm actually having a lot of fun with this art. This is good stuff. Good, strong storytelling, good, big, fantastical Superman concepts. And this is the start of a new arc called The Chained Part 1. And basically, Lex has survived.
Well, hold on. It's funny because I talked about this last week with Jim Ski on the show about Green Lantern. And this was it's been 3 months since we had the cliffhanger in which Lex got shanked in prison. Right? So we're hitting now. All these DC books are finally back. And so like this book, Nightwing, it's like I've got to really work hard to remember where we were 3 months ago.
I didn't read a single one of those Night Terror books.
I didn't either. So, but I was like, wait, what had happened? Oh, right, Lex got attacked. Like it was like every DC book I read this week, I had to do that in my head as I started reading them. But so now we're dealing with the fallout of that, of Lex being attacked in prison while Superman was otherwise engaged, and what all that means.
And it's interesting, Superman realizes that he was tricked into not being able to hear Lex at a moment when, like, he realizes that it was a plot and it worked against him. And I really like the scene where he and Lois are going over, like, what can the Daily Planet do about this? And she's like, well, wait a second, didn't Lex give you his company? Like, don't you have other resources available? I was like, oh yeah, he does. That's a good point, Lois.
Leave me alone. Right.
And I love the like innate brash offensiveness of Lex creating a hologram version of himself and calling him son, like Jor-El.
Yeah,
like,
he makes a Jor-El version of himself to help. It's this book has been terrific. I liked that again. Superman has been tricked here. Mm-hmm. He was tricked in the last issue. He's tricked again into going into the bowels of LexCorp and finding this giant safe covered in giant comic book chains, breaking it open and releasing someone who seems to be pretty bad. But he was tricked into it. And Superman is not dumb, but it's always, clearly whoever he's dealing with is very formidable, because now it's just two issues in a row where he's been bested mentally.
But it's somebody, they're like floating, so they seem to have some sort of, and they are able to redirect Superman's heat vision. And to me, they look like sort of a bedraggled 90s era Lex when he had the long hair and the beard.
Maybe.
No, you don't think? Because the hair's kind of reddish.
Bright red. Well, it looks black.
I think it's no. There's a panel where he's flying up into the sun.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. It's red tint.
It's red.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So I don't know. So I wonder
maybe if it is Lex Luthor too.
Right?
Maybe it is. It's his body. It's got a brain in it.
And then the end of the issue is Lex waking up and bald Lex waking up in his hospital and be like, Superman, what have you done? And it's just like, oh, it's just good comic book fun. It's gosh.
It is, and it's very classic Superman. Everyone even though they're in positions that might be slightly different, Lois is filling in for Perry as editor-in-chief of the paper, but other than that, the Lois and Clark stuff is terrific. The stuff the paper is terrific. Superman being the man out of water trying to run what is now called Superman Corp is kind of silly, but also kind of fun. I really liked the interaction he had with one of the low-level techie guys who showed him something, and Superman called him by name, and we see him run back to the other techies going, he knew my name, and they're like, you're wearing a name tag, buddy. But that's fun. Him and Mercy is a strange but interesting pairing, because she's sort of his right-hand man at Superman Corp now, and it's all different enough, but feeling very classic. Like, as I say all these things, the status quo is very different, but it doesn't feel very different. It feels still very much Superman, and I like it. And I like whatever they've got going on here with this guy covered in chains and whatever that means, and we don't know, but it will continue next month.
But that was also part of the reason it was the pick, was like, oh, this is like Superman, sometimes is referred to as having sort of an underwhelming villains roster compared to some of the other really top tier heroes. And, this one they're introducing, like, I don't know if it's going to stick, but I was interested in the concept. I thought the execution was like it was surprisingly creepy for a Superman book.
Yeah.
And it just worked. And it even though we don't have the answers yet, I was engaged enough by the mystery of it. I was like, oh, this is interesting.
That's the best part of the story, right? When you don't know what's going on and you've got to try to figure it out along with the characters.
Guys, where are we?
It's part one, so you hope to not have a lot of answers. I'm looking through it again, and the art, the Jamal Campbell art was a huge reason why I loved the book. I mean, I've been really enjoying the story. I think Josh Williamson's doing a terrific job, but I think the Gleb Melnikoff's art is good.
I agree.
Solid. He's a good storyteller. He's got interesting character models. Again, kind of Ed McGuinness-y. Superman's a big old dude, and the villain is appropriately creepy. He's got big long limbs and sort of a sunken face, and he did a really good job. As I'm rapidly flipping through it, I'm seeing stuff I really like. There's great angles. There's page 16. There's a really nice, sort of low, long angle of the chains going to the body. We can see it it's a high angle. We're looking at it from above. But the chains are coming at us. Like, there's some really interesting work here. So I think this is a good, alternate artist to work with. Jamal Campbell, who's not going to be able to do every issue because he's a terrific artist, and most of them can't do them. The work that's required is not done in a month. So
would this have been your pick? I know sometimes when it's not your pick, you don't even come up with an answer for that. But
I don't know. There was a lot of books I really liked this week. It was definitely in the discussion. Like, after I read it, I was like, "Oh man, that was terrific again." And then when did you read it?
Did you read it before or after I told you it was the
before?
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
There was several books I would have made the pick. There's one I'm kind of leaning to, but since I don't have to pick one, I don't have to pick one.
I understand.
It's not no longer my stress. So I will just keep saying, as you have and Josh as well, this Superman series is terrific. And if you're not reading it and you like Superman at all, you do yourself a favor. It's the best Superman. I mean, Action Comics is good, but this is terrific. And as we've been, this is Superman week here at iFanboy. We released a Booksplode about the Death of Superman book. So we're all in Superman headspace right now.
Well, speaking of guys running multi-billion-dollar corporations, Rumpus Room by Mark Russell, the new Mark Russell book from AWA. Is it AWA or AWA?
It's AWA. Yeah.
Comics with art by Ramon Rosanas. And two Mark Russell books this week. The latest issue of Traveling to Mars, which I think has been the pick at least once.
It's been a pick once before, yeah. And it's on the rundown, but this issue was really, really good.
Yeah, and I have gotten caught up on this book based on it being the pick. I wasn't reading it until it was the pick, and then once it was the pick, I was like, oh, I should read that. And so I've been reading that book, and it is really good. But I was just a little more interested to talk about what seems to be like part of the Billionaire Island universe, but clearly not. But it's so.
Is it not? Is it not? Because I think the main reason I didn't read it was because I thought, well, I've had a lot of books that Mark Russell's written about billionaires, and those are probably my least favorite of the ones he's written. And so I was like, I'll wait to hear what people think before I check it out. Because I was like, I don't know. I feel like he's been doing that a lot. Cause it's been a lot of Billionaire Island books.
So Billionaire Island wasn't published by
no, it's not. It's
but this is it. This book has some similar themes where it's a ruthless billionaire who lives in a really fancy beach house, and this woman shows up looking for her missing sister, who is an accountant for his company, and he kind of gives her the brush off, and then like knocks her out with nerve gas, and then has these guys in animal costumes come and put her in a private prison that this billionaire is running in his Rumpus Room, and the prisoners seem to have completely given up on trying to escape, and the opening scene is the billionaire complaining about like a face cream product that either his company is producing or he wants to use to keep himself looking young, and then like the prisoners all vote, and they basically cast out one of the fellow prisoners, and she gets put in an Iron Maiden and turned into like a goop that he puts on his face as the face cream.
Well, that's gross.
Yeah, so like, but it's hard not to compare that to Billionaire Island because that's almost exactly what they did in that book.
Was it?
Well, remember, because they had that the people who weren't billionaires on the island got put in that like prison cell.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. They had that whole. Yes, they were. Yes.
So I'm surprised by how similar that is, but it seems like he's trying to work out something different conceptually here. And we find out the cliffhanger at the end of the book is it turns out the woman wasn't just investigating her sister as a citizen. She is a cop and has a gun on her, and they didn't frisk her before throwing her in the cell. So now she's got a gun inside the prison cell with all the other prisoners.
I mean, I know he's also writing Second Coming right now, but I feel like he could have gone to a different story before coming back to looking at the excesses of, evil billionaires.
It sounds like I read the back of the issue essay because it was a really good issue, and the one thing I want to really emphasize here is I sometimes feel like, and this is something that's come up a lot on the show before, is that when you work for these indie publishers, they don't always have the resources to get the best or most experienced artists. And the art in this is fantastic. I don't know that I know Ramon Rosanas from anything else, but it's really strong out of the gate in a way that sometimes I find Mark Russell's books suffer from the art not being as good as the story itself could be. And, and the cover's by Tony Harris and is a really compelling cover as well. So I'm glad to see
AWA is the former, those big editorial hitters there. So they have been getting high quality people in their books.
And so the idea, in his back of the issue essay, he basically talks about I guess, does he live in Phoenix? I guess I didn't realize that, but
I don't know.
So in Phoenix, for folks listening to this in the distant future, it's 2023. We just experienced the hottest summer on record, which might also be the coolest summer for the rest of our lives, right? That's the reality of the situation we're in. It's super depressing. It's super bleak. And he was in Phoenix when they had an entire month of days where temperatures were above 110 degrees and typically didn't drop below 90 at night.
Yeah, I saw that in the news.
So he, I think, is feeling frustration at our collective inability to deal with some of the problems the world is facing, especially climate change. And it's something that, we should be taking really seriously. We should be doing a lot. We should be devoting almost every resource at our disposal to tackling this issue. And we kind of just aren't because the political will isn't there. And so he sort of compares that to being a prisoner who just accepts the fact that you're in prison. There's nothing you can do and you have to vote out prisoners one by one and hope it's not you next. And he just wanted to write a book about people in a situation like that who suddenly are given the opportunity to actually change their circumstances by this cop showing up with a gun and what they decide to do in reaction to that. So
was it like your second in the pick? Was it like
it was pretty high. It was pretty high up there. I mean, I think the art being as strong as it was, the story being intriguing. You know, I have existential dread about climate change too. Like that back of the end of issue essay actually kind of spoke to me on that level.
Right.
I think the first 3 books we're going to talk about were my top contenders, and I think I put them more or less in the order that I would have ranked them if I had to.
So Captain America 751 or Giant 1 on the cover. The new reboot, which I was excited for because I just did not at all like the last volume. I liked all the people involved. I just didn't think the story was compelling or very good. And it was another one of those, everything you know about this character is wrong stories, and I just sick of those.
So what were your feelings about this going in with the creative team as listed
I was
on the
excited.
cover?
Jesus says, however you say this last name, is someone I really like as an artist. I think he's very solid and good storyteller, and we'll get into it in a minute, but I like a lot of what he did here. I don't hate J. Michael Straczynski like Josh kind of does. I mean, I share his bemusement on his inability to finish anything, but, he's written a lot of comics I really like. He's written some comics I really didn't like, but that's not that unusual for a lot of people. So I was excited.
For some reason, Straczynski, I think it's probably because of his tendency to not finish projects that he's started. I think he's just developed a reputation in comics where you're expected to have a strong opinion on him as a creator more so than other people who...
Yeah, I just don't. Like, I get it. The walk story was dumb. I hated the Gwen Stacy thing, but there's other comics he's written I think are really terrific. So I always, if he's writing something I like or I'm interested in, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And I think his sensibility is kind of right on the money for Captain America.
I think so too. That was a thought I had while I was reading this. I was like, yeah, this is like really good Cap characterization.
His Americana sort of throwback, old fashioned sensibility. It's perfect for Cap. And other than the worst thing about this book was the cover was really bad. But
I have a different feeling on the worst thing about this book, but we can get into it.
I thought the cover was just really, really bad. So this, resetting things with Cap, he is now, I guess, he's in the Lower East Side. Thankfully, they haven't moved him to Brooklyn, but he's living in the building he grew up in. It's being condemned. He decides to get a loan from Tony, and he buys it. I thought Tony was broke, but does not matter. Does not matter. There is no more continuity in any of his books.
And for me, the worst part of this issue was, for whatever reason, the way that Straczynski wrote Tony and Cap's dialogue between each other, I thought was awful.
He was doing Robert Downey Jr. for sure. So he buys the building, saves it from being condemned, saves all of his neighbors from being thrown on the street. And it's mostly an issue spent in flashback to himself as a kid and, fixing the building up while thinking back to when he had to survive when his dad died and his mom died.
And there's a great page, I think it's 11 on your digital reader, where it transitions to the past and you see the building going from being in a state where it was going to be condemned and a teardown into back to its pristine 1930s. No, so the neighborhood I live in DC, most of the buildings around here were built in the 1920s, and it's pretty consistent. Like, the land went from being like a privately held plantation to, development for a neighborhood. And so all the buildings kind of went up at the same time. Is that similar to the Lower East Side of Manhattan? I don't know.
I don't think they all went up at the same time, but you've got your pre-war buildings that look kind of like this. I'm not overly familiar. I didn't grow up in the Lower East Side. I grew up in the Upper West Side. It's about as far from there as you can get, still staying in Manhattan. So I'm not quite as familiar as with the history of that architecture, but it's not unusual. So much of Manhattan was went up in that time period of the early 1900s. So that makes sense. I thought it was really fun. He briefly goes to help with Fantastic Four. I really liked when he comes back through the portal, lays down on the grass, and it's just.
And I love the I hope Reed lets me keep the jetpack. But yeah, the tired. Hello, front lawn.
Because he's gone for what's for him days. It's only a short amount of time for the world. I just thought it was, as a character piece, it was terrific. Yes. I really loved that Jesus says drew him to look like a guy from the 40s, because so often you see Cap just. We always make fun of a hipster Cap, and he's kind of like that in the Uncanny Avengers book this week, where he just looks like a guy from Bushwick and not a guy who came from the 40s. And
Well, I like how he conversed with his neighbors, where he was like very open about the like. Well, let's see, that would have been 36, and they're like, well, you became cap in 40. He's like, yeah, I know, this was before. I thought like his frankness about his own longevity, I thought was interesting in a way that we don't rarely see him just being able to talk about it as a person that you would talk, that anyone else would also just talk about their memories.
He's also beefy, like first movie Chris Evans was.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
It made seeing the way Jesus Saez drew him modern day was reminiscent. So I remember like, I watched some YouTube video once that was like facts about the MCU you didn't know, and I don't know, just some garbage to have on in the background. Yeah. And like one of the facts was like the costumers regularly put Chris Evans in a size shirt too small. I was like, is that really a fun fact that nobody could have figured out? Like, yeah, obviously that was not, like, he's not wearing a shirt. It's stretched over every fiber of his being.
I still remember Comic-Con one year we went to see, they did a premiere of Scott Pilgrim, and he's obviously in that movie, but it was while he was shooting Captain America. And we were up in the balcony, and we didn't realize this, but they had a section in front of the balcony reserved for the cast, because the cast all came out, and they were like, everybody was there. And then the lights went down, and they snuck out and came back in and sat in the balcony. And at one point, this hulking figure passes by, not right in front of us, maybe 20 rows in front. And I was like, Jesus, who was that? And it was Chris Evans, because he was so big.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I one more fun Chris Evans fact. This actually is a fun fact that people might not know. The shawarma scene, they didn't. Yeah. I think most of us know they didn't film that as part of their movie.
He's got his beard on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, then I guess you did know. What about the listener?
I think we talked about it on the podcast review. And then there's introduces a villain that I'm not familiar with. He seems like it's a new person.
Sort of mystical South American spirit demon thing.
And then at the end, which I'm not super thrilled by.
I thought that was the weakest part of the story.
J. Michael just needs to stay away from all mystical demonic villains. But
it turns out Captain America is a totemic figure.
I will burn this place to the ground if that's what happens. But then it ends with a flashback again to young Steve encountering the Bund. And I was just like, oh, he's just hitting all my buttons right now. The German American Bund, which was the American Nazi, sympathetic party, and he flipped all the switches for me for Captain America. And obviously this wasn't an action heavy issue, though there was a little bit of it, and I'm looking forward to more of that coming up. But
the cover for issue 2 is him with Spider-Man. So like when Sue Storm showed up here, I guess I'm guessing the format for this book is going to be each issue is part flashback, part team up,
which will be great. And I like his relationship with Peter a lot. Peter, one of my favorite issues of that Avenging Spider-Man? What book was that? Where Peter and Steve bonded over being kind of nerds, because they often don't deal with the fact that Steve was like a quiet comic book artist, and they bond over that in that issue. It's one of my favorite. I think Zeb Wells wrote it. Anyway,
there's a lot of like great Cap and Peter moments over the years. I remember one that always sticks out to me is like Peter goes to the Avengers Mansion and sees Captain America training, and he's like, wait, this guy has to train? Because for Peter, he doesn't have to Peter doesn't work out, Peter doesn't practice. He just his powers cover that. And like when he realized that Captain America is a guy who puts in the work, his like respect for him only grows. And I always thought that was like an awesome scene that juxtaposes the different perspectives.
Yes, I'm looking forward to more of this. I like this a lot. This might have been my pick. I didn't really think about it, but it was leaning towards it at the end. So that might have been it. But I'm excited for this. Certainly for right now doesn't offend me as the last arc did, but we'll see what happens.
You're not offended by Nazis, Connor? How dare you?
Well, I'm not offended by Captain America punching them.
God, this is the episode where Connor gets canceled.
Jack Kirby's Star Warriors: The Adventures of Adam Starr and the Solar Legion. Now, this book, Ryan and I both read because it was neck and neck for Patron Pick, and I don't know if I would have read it otherwise. I might have, but I don't know. It's hard to say. It's from Image Comics. It's a one-shot, and the origins are not dubious, but confusing. So this is a quote-unquote remix of a Jack Kirby comic from 1940 that he did when he was 22 years old. 20 some odd years before he helps create the Marvel Universe. And the stories appeared in Crash Comics, which was an anthology back then. And it was his sci-fi character, Adam Starr. Sounds kind of similar to Adam Strange, but not really. But I'm not sure what Scioli did here versus what Kirby did. I've read conflicting reports.
Yeah, I would have loved to. I was reading this hoping that the back matter was going to give us some side by side pages, so we could at least see sort of in general what Scioli did to
I don't know if he redrew the whole thing or just parts of it.
Or I wonder if because the way the layout doesn't. I haven't read the most Golden Age comics, but the layout for this feels like a more modern layout. I don't know if maybe he rearranged the panels, made them a lot bigger so that there's less text heaviness.
It's hard to say, and they have not been very forthcoming in the materials about what was done by whom. I've read this. The opening says that this was a Jack Kirby story that ran across 3 issues. I've read he only actually drew one of them. I don't know. It's just very confusing. I'm not going to get overly concerned about it, but I didn't know. It says faithfully adapted from the original Solar Legion stories. Characters are created by Jack Kirby as they appeared in Crash Comics. So my gut is he just redrew the whole thing. That's my gut.
But it doesn't. I mean, Tom Scioli has a style that is purposefully reminiscent of Jack Kirby, but
this is 22-year-old Jack Kirby.
Right, and this is so early in his career that his signature style. I also wonder if the way that things are maybe shaded or inked is where Scioli did most of the work here. I don't know. I'm curious. I would love. I don't know if those original Crash Comics issues are easy to get or have been digitized.
Probably not. My gut is that he redrew this whole thing, but that's just me guessing. It doesn't really matter.
Just use the same text.
Yeah. Just sort of redid it, or maybe even expanded on it to make it fit a full issue. I don't know if this was worth $10.
Yeah,
30 pages or whatever it was. But I enjoyed it. I
noticed that too.
I enjoyed it from an anthropological point of view because it's not. I mean, look. Even if Tom Scioli redrew it, he redrew based on what Kirby did. So, Kirby's in here, right? So we can assume this is the Kirby stories, even if he added more pages, even if he didn't actually draw this art. But it's redrawn. If it is.
I like the idea of this as an exercise. I like the idea of let's take some old Golden Age comics and get a modern artist to sort of riff on them a little bit, maybe make them a little bit more readable to a modern.
But I'm not saying he riffed on them because I think he just redrew exactly how Kirby drew it. I don't think
right. But what I'm trying to say is I would actually, this issue I had fun with. It was an enjoyable little romp, but I also would be curious to see this done with other books from that era.
Well, my point really is that it was interesting to see how the storytelling was done because really, it's not a story. It's more of someone telling you a story, if that makes sense. It's not. I was thinking of it more like a drawn treatment. It's not like a script.
Or it's like a written radio play. Or a drawn radio play.
Yeah, maybe. It's there's not a ton of dialogue. I think the first bit of dialogue shows up 10 pages in. And it's more like this guy did this, and then this happened, and then he did this thing, and then this guy got shot. And it was more like someone describing a story to you than actually the story.
Adam radios the Martian Legion base and promptly receives his answer in the form of a patrol ship carrying the rocket boat he requested,
Yeah, so it felt more like a drawn treatment than a drawn story. So it's interesting to see that way.
Anti-Bendis.
Yeah, and I just found it really fascinating to read it in that sense, how were stories being told in some form or fashion in the 40s. Not all stories were being told like this, but I liked that aspect.
One other interesting anthropological artifact was, this story is set on a couple different spots around the solar system. One spot is on Venus, and Venus is sort of a very wet, humid tropical desert or tropical forest, which, there was a time where it was theorized that Venus is covered in clouds. Under those clouds might be jungle,
Right.
And you got to remember this was being done in the late 30s, early 40s. So we hadn't been to space yet.
Right.
So then also when he's on Mars, there are canals, and there was a whole thing about one of the early astronomers looking at Mars saw these linear structures that we now know to be a certain type of sand dune that forms in the Martian atmosphere, but or the Martian environment. But he theorized if there's a civilization there, maybe they built canals because these things look like they run really straight lines and in really consistent patterns. So I liked that. I don't know. I know Kirby was a big Von Daniken guy who was the writer who wrote Chariot of the Gods and sort of first gave the world the idea of the ancient aliens who had come to Earth and built the pyramids and all that stuff. So I know Kirby was a big into that, and so it was interesting to see maybe sort of his sort of astronomical thinking portrayed on the page as a young man. I when you mentioned that's being an anthropological artifact, that was also something that came to mind.
Yeah, and I mean, there was one point where he talks about, the ship gets blown up and there's bodies floating, frozen in space, and I thought, wow, did they know that that's what would happen to bodies? Like, I just didn't know. What?
I think yeah, by the time Kirby was in his 20s, we were pretty sure that space wasn't like an ether anymore. That it was just a vacuum, but who knows?
Anyway, I thought the art was really interesting. It's not the Kirby we would know from the 60s. Again, even if it's surely it's him drawing Kirby. So this is what it looked like probably. I like that you could, and again, it may not be. It could be all be Kirby. I just don't know. I like that you could see the graphite on the page. I thought the designs were fun. I mean, it was a fun, thrilling story told with a giant remove to it. It wasn't like you were in the story. It's like someone relating a story to you. So that was interesting. I found it more interesting than good. I liked reading it. I really enjoyed reading it. I just found it really more interesting than like entertaining.
Yeah, I think there's value to be had if you want to, on any level, consider yourself a scholar of comics or somebody who cares about the medium in a deeper way. I think reading books like this are informative. So,
and I liked the little 2-page story at the end, Cyclone Burke, about a World War I pilot who gets sucked into a vortex and into an alien world.
God, can you imagine being a World War I pilot? I can imagine getting sucked into an alien vortex, I think, more easily than I can imagine being a World War I pilot.
It was just, and as someone who likes comic history, it was interesting to read. That's more than anything.
Sticking with it?
Well, that's all there is. So, quick break. Let's talk about how you can help support iFanboy. Patreon.com/iFanboy is the most direct way to support the show. If you think we bring value to your comic book life, if you think we bring value to your just sort of entertainment life, if you find the show fun and enjoyable to listen to, if you think it adds something to your comic book knowledge or appreciation, all those things might lead you to think, hey, maybe I should support the show. Make sure they keep doing what they're doing below those 18 years. And patreon.com/iFanboy is the best way to do it. When you become a patron, you join a great community. There's a Facebook group. There's a Discord server. We've got a lot of new people join recently. Paul's been super active in it recently. Ever since his show, he's been in there every day. And we give you merch for being a patron. We reward you. After 3 months of patronage, you get tier-exclusive merch. There's sweatshirts and T-shirts and mugs and posters, all kinds of things, depending on what level you're at. And you get that as a reward. We thank you for that. Also, you get to join our monthly patron hangouts, which I think is happening next weekend.
Next Saturday, yeah.
Where, for an hour officially, Josh, Ron, and I hang out and chat and talk to the fans, and we even have a call-in number. We occasionally do call-in shows, but usually sometimes for an hour or two before that, we have the pre-hangout Tiki Happy Hour, which we started doing during the lockdown as just a way of socializing, but now we kind of keep doing it because it's fun. Me and sometimes Ryan, and sometimes Gordon the intern, sometimes Mike Romo, sometimes Hank the arms dealer, and sometimes even Ron shows up, and we have a good time. So it's a 2 or 3 hour experience once a month for the patrons, and we have a lot of fun doing that.
Gordon's still the intern, and Hank went straight to arms dealer. That's wild.
We enjoy doing it. It's a fun time. It's a loose, alcohol-fueled show for the patrons, and we thank you. iFanboy.threadless.com is our t-shirt store. You can find our 13 shirt designs there, and those designs can get put on other things besides shirts, but mostly people buy shirts, and they're good shirts. I was just wearing the Stay Home and Read Comics baseball tee the other day. It's very comfortable. iFanboy.com/support is our direct donation PayPal tip jar. So again, if you're one of those billionaires who doesn't put people into weird prisons in order to take their fleshy bits and make them into creams.
I don't know that we have any evidence to suggest that that's not true for all billionaires.
I mean, I feel like it's probably true that not all billionaires do that.
I don't know. I mean,
I used to work for one, and he definitely was not smart enough to do that. Anyway, fanboy.com/support is a great place to throw in a digital tip if you don't feel like being a patron or buying a shirt, and that's totally great.
If you don't feel like being a billionaire.
Yeah, listen, if you have a tax issue, that's a great way to do it. Instead of hiding it in some sketchy offshore account, throw it into the PayPal.
Or if you need us to meet you in the Caymans
right.
to do the transfer.
If you have a couple of suitcases you need us to handle, we'll
I'll go. Like, I like scuba diving. I'll go on a trip to the Caymans for a little cash transfer, a little scuba diving.
I will figure out exactly how to make that work. iFanboy.com/Amazon is our Booksplode store. You can find all of the links to all of our Booksplode books, as well as a general shopping link. And actually, I need to update that with the new Booksplode book. And bookshop.org is our partner to help support local bookstores. When you go to Booksplode shows, you'll see a link to buy the Booksplode book via bookshop.org. It helps out local bookstores. It's where I buy my books. And as long as local bookstores are around, society is not totally lost. So,
libraries.
And libraries. There you go. Those are the ways you help support the show. We thank everyone who does that. Let's move on to Uncanny Spider-Man #1.
Real quick, though. How many library cards you got?
Actually, I don't have any.
Oh.
Libraries in LA are not super great.
Okay. I'm up to 4.
All right. Well,
I have apparently as a DC resident, there's like 9 different libraries in the area that will give me a card, and I've just been working my way through the list. When I have to, like, if I find myself in Arlington, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to the library and get a card.
When I grew up in Manhattan, I lived there on the corner from a library, and I was there weekly as a kid. Not multiple times a week.
Yeah, we've already gotten Cal already has at least 1 library card. So
Uncanny Spider-Man #1, the latest issue in the Fall of X. Is that what the name is? I closed my iPad.
Yeah, Fall of X. Yeah.
Cy Spurrier, Lee Garbett, and I thought this was super fun. I am really enjoying, I've said it before, these X-Men books. I'm not reading all of them, but I'm picking and choosing. And this particular book is just wacky enough to be awesome.
I didn't know this was an X-Men book when I downloaded it.
Nightcrawler,
because the cover thumbnail was too small, and I thought it was a Miles Morales book. I did not realize it was Nightcrawler until I saw it full size on my iPad screen. And I was like, oh, huh.
Nightcrawler is hiding from Orcus by pretending to be a Spider-Man. He's got one of Peter's spare suits, and he's got.
Also, why does Peter have a suit that looks so much like Miles' suit?
Well, Miles must have got his suit from somewhere. It doesn't look like Miles' suit, though. Just the color scheme does.
All right.
I thought it was fun. I thought Nightcrawler trying to be the friendly neighborhood Nightcrawler was funny.
Yes.
I did have a revelation about Orcus this week because I read 2 books. I read Uncanny Avengers and I read this one. And I don't understand why everyone's down with Orcus. Like Orcus, sponsors that school in Miss Marvel, and they've got merch, and people here, the regular folks, the non-mutants, are talking about how great Orcus is. But Orcus has said, for every mutant we find on Earth, we're going to kill 10 humans. Why is anyone cool with that? Why are they all like, Orcus is great? I was like, I had a moment where I was like, wait a minute, because I had forgotten that bit, and I was like, I think it came up in the Uncanny Avengers book, and I was like, why is everyone down with Orcus if they're going to murder 10 humans for every mutant they find? Anyway, this was super fun. I thought this was really enjoyable.
I thought so as well. I don't, just because I'm not digging the Fall of X stuff as much as you are, I don't know that I will stick with this, but I thought the Lee Garbett art was fantastic.
Yeah, really good, yeah.
Really, really solid art. I think many of us who have been comics readers for a long time, you don't have to be a next level thinker to realize, like, oh, Nightcrawler and Spider-Man have some stuff in common, right? Like, right. They both can stick to walls, they're both very agile, but like Nightcrawler can teleport, but he's not as strong as Spider-Man, so it's interesting to see.
But he's got a sword.
He's got a sword.
Here's what I really like about this. I mean, I like the overall stuff, but I'm always a fan of the mix and the match, right? Take the characters in a bag and throw them and then pull some random ones out. So here you've got Nightcrawler. In this issue, he's fighting the Vulture, who's calling himself Director Vulture because he's got a lab job, and then next issue's cover is him and Rhino. So I like the idea of putting now Nightcrawler up against Spider-Man's villains because I've never seen that before.
Yep,
and so that's what I really liked about this issue.
I really liked it too.
So I think a telling thing for me is that I think I saw that Fishflies #2 came out, and my eyes just kept on going. I didn't register.
Did you read the first issue?
I did read the first one. I think it was Patron Pick, but I did read it. I always check out Jeff Lemire. I don't remember what it was about. Like if you came in and if you walked in here and put a gun to my head, I would have to die because I don't remember what it was about.
Well, let's not let it come to that.
I don't remember if I liked it or not. I might have. I'm sure we talked about it. When you put it on the list, I was like, oh, that book. I just didn't register with me.
Yeah, and I don't know. Like
what is it about? Remind me and the listeners what it's about.
It is about a town in Ontario. I think this might be back in Essex County, but not in, I think this is a more fantastical tale than that. And it's about a group of kids who go to a mini mart while the mini mart is being robbed, and one of the kids gets shot, and the guy who shoots the kid, runs and hides in the barn of a farm of where a different kid lives, and then he turns
into a bunch of flies.
Yeah, and so the Fishflies refer to this bug that come off of the Lake Michigan.
Right.
I was just in Chicago. I should know. But really, I'm more of a rivers guy, so I don't know lakes as well.
That's all right. You don't have to.
So it's about so the Fishflies refers to this bug. I guess it's like
Huron.
No, wait. What's the one?
Lake Titicaca.
Where's Detroit?
Lake Erie.
Maps.
Lake.
It must be Lake Huron. So
yeah.
So reading this book made me realize that I actually didn't know where Essex County was in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Like, having loved that series, I think that.
Oh, sure. Great series. Great miniseries.
Yeah. Well, it was a series of 3 graphic novels.
Yeah, but it was a miniseries. Yeah.
And the way that Essex County is portrayed is like it's super rural, right? But it's across the border from Detroit. Like, it's practically a suburb of Detroit. I didn't realize. And I know those books are set in the past. But Fishflies refers to a fish fly or shad fly that spends most of its prepubescent life in the water, so in Lake Erie, and then has like a mating cycle where they metamorphose into their adult stage, and they fly into the air, sort of like cicadas when we get our big annual cicada blooms here in the U.S. And so they all they emerge from the lake, they cover everything in bugs, and then they die within like 48 to 72 hours because it's they metamorphose into adults to mate. They don't even have mouth parts. They can't eat, so they just mate, lay their eggs, die. So this town is just covered in these bugs, and then this guy who shot this kid, the kid is alive but in a coma. The mom is having like visions while she's praying over the body. The sheriff's trying to solve the crime. The guy who shot the kid is turning into a large bug man, like Avid's Metamorphosis style, in the barn of this girl. And I couldn't quite tell you what the full complete through line is, but it's just I'm loving Jeff Lemire back on story and art, because I just felt like we all recognized
he's done several.
He's done several, but it's. I mean,
lately,
to me, it's a treat because like his style is so far from mainstream comics that to see him do his thing and just tell stories the way that his hand, both as writer and artist, wants to tell them, I think is special in a way that the stuff he's just writing isn't always there. Which is not to say that his writing isn't always good. It's just this is different in a way that I like.
His writing can be great. Essex County was amazing and made us all weep. And Sweet Tooth and other books. The one he did not too long ago about the guy looking for his daughter. But what I've often said about him on the show is he has a lot of ideas, and I don't always respond to all of them, and that's totally fine because he does a lot of books. And I don't remember. Maybe I didn't love the first one. I'm just listening to you now. I'm like, I don't really think I missed anything by missing this one this week. It just doesn't seem like it's up my alley. But maybe I'll be wrong.
And I'm not totally in love with it. But when I reflect on the fact that these are 60-page issues, like they're oversized.
Oh, that's right. It was giant. I remember that. Yeah.
But because Jeff Lemire's style is so sparse, they read really quickly and smoothly. And I don't know. I think there's part of me that misses that sort of indie boom of the early aughts that had me reading a lot of books that were well outside the mainstream, well outside the superhero. And so to have something that scratches that itch in my stack is it's fun again, whether I'm super into the story or not. I just enjoy that that's a thing I get to have.
I'm sad, I'm sad that Josh is sick, but also that he's not here to talk about Hey Kids Comics Volume 3, Number 6, the final issue of Hey Kids Comics.
And I was reading this, but I've fallen far enough behind that I couldn't catch up today, so I haven't read it yet.
The book that Josh and I both loved and hated at the same time. Hated only because it would drive us crazy trying to figure out who everybody's supposed to be. This issue opens up with a 28-person cast of characters first page, which should have been a sign that this was the end. But I didn't know it was the end until I got to the very end of this issue. And we get to... this is, of course, the fictionalized history of comics. It's not the actual history, not the actual people. It's the fictionalized history. And so in the last issue, we had 1986. We had Crisis on Infinite Earths. We had Dark Knight Returns. We had Watchmen. This issue sort of starts from that place, goes through Image being created, Alan Moore going over to Image. Of course, none of these people are named that. Image screwing over Alan Moore. All the things that happened in that time period. First, it's like the boom of the Image guys at Marvel and all the books they were working on.
Hang on, wait, is it Boom or is it Image? Which publisher? Oh,
right, it was all of them. They had it's all that stuff. It's all McFarlane and Lee and Liefeld doing the Super Spider-Man and the X-Men books, and then them creating Image and then bringing Alan Moore over and his imprint, and then Jim Lee selling Wildstorm, under which his imprint was to DC, who Alan Moore hated, and that ended up going badly. Anyway, this ends with Ray Clark, who is what's his name, Gil Kane, dying, and at his funeral. He's been a main character through the whole book. And then we cut to the last 1, 2, 3, 4 pages are all about Howard Chaykin's life. He's been a character in the book, or the fictionalized version of him, but here we see him as a young man in New York, a slightly older man, and still in New York, a early middle-aged man in Hollywood, a middle-aged man in Hollywood, and then he decides as a sort of a middle-aged man to go back to comics, leaves Hollywood, and goes back to New York. And everyone's like, "Why did you leave comics?" Everyone's trying to get from comics to TV, and there's a really great final page where it's 4 panels with 2 inserts where we see him as a little kid laying in a bed of comics. We see him as a teenager at a comic rack at a newsstand. We see him as a young guy at a drawing table, and we see him as an old man now, as he is now, drawing at the same table. And he says, "Really, for better or worse, I'm a comic book man." And it says, "The end." And I just thought it was a really nice ending to a book that we've loved, but has also been confounding at the same time. But there's nothing out there like this book, and I'm sad it's over. But I've enjoyed it all the way through.
Yeah, what a fun! I mean, I hope that this was a cathartic exercise for Chaykin.
Yeah, he certainly got a lot of his demons out, or a lot of his stories out. You know.
Yeah, and his interview with Josh was something else. So, if you haven't listened to that Talksplode with Howard Chaykin, it is a ride. Like you're holding on.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's been around since almost the beginning, at least of the Silver Age. So he's got the stories. He's heard them all. Those are the books we wanted to talk about. But at Patreon.com, every patron has a chance to vote to add a book to the rundown. Every patron, one vote. And this week, as we mentioned earlier, was a tight vote. And Wonder Woman #1 ended up edging out the Jack Kirby Star Warriors book by 1 vote. That's the Patron Pick. Wonder Woman #1, written by Tom King, art by Daniel Sampere, colors by Tomu Moret and Clayton Cowles on letters. And this is Tom King's return to ongoing. I think he hasn't. I mean, I don't think Penguin's an ongoing. I would doubt it is. But he hasn't really done ongoing work since Batman, which was a while ago. So exciting, interesting choice to do Wonder Woman. I always check out a new Wonder Woman anyway. This is actually Wonder Woman 801. It's the legacy numbering is 1. The legacy number is 801. The new numbering is 1. So the story of this book is basically, and it's funny because we talked in the last episode about how, in some comics in Marvel, superheroes are outlawed in New York, and some comics they're not. They're just there. And in this one, the Amazons are outlawed in America after an Amazon kills a bunch of men at a roadhouse bar after being, provoked to. And so after this horrific murder, the modern news cycle goes into effect and spirals into the point where Amazons are banned from America, much like mutants are banned from Earth in the Marvel universe. And Sergeant Steele is tasked with capturing or killing the Amazons, and that's kind of the story as we go through the issue until we get to the end, and when he's unable to capture or kill Wonder Woman herself. And there's a big reveal, which we'll get to in a second. What did you think overall about this issue?
I hate to say this as the first comment that I have, but I thought this was kind of a slog.
I think the captions were very, very heavy.
There were some wall of text issues that I it took me a couple of attempts to get all the way through this book, just because I would get to like a page where it's all the news talking heads, and it's trying to show the progression of the news cycle in the sort of misinformation about the Amazons, but I was just like, it's a straight on shot of a head with a bunch of word balloons.
Yeah, there's a lot. There was a couple of pages of news talking heads and a lot of text.
So I wanted to like this. I thought the art was really great, and I like that Tom King always tries to come up with a fresh take on a character, and I think he's getting somewhere with Wonder Woman, but this issue didn't. I don't think this was the issue that I needed to get fully invested in a new series.
It's interesting, as an aside, when he used to write Wonder Woman in her appearances in like Batman or whatever, he would write her as if Gal Gadot was doing the dialogue, and now it's just back to sort of standard dialogue. We find out through the course of this issue that so someone is narrating the book, and they've got a blue caption box with white text, and there's a sort of an aside earlier in one of the news segments from one of the congressmen are talking about the Amazons and commenting on the fact that lethal force has been used and saying that's just a rumor on the internet, much like there's a rumor that there's a secret king of America. Well, it turns out there is a secret king of America, and he was the one narrating the book. And I was so happy at that reveal because the book felt very heavy until that point. And what I mean is, like, it was very emotionally heavy. It was very kind of dark. He's clearly paralleling a lot of what's going on in America now, and the Amazons being persecuted and driven out of the country and murdered and killed in front of their parents, and all these horrible things are happening. And I was like, oh man, this is fucking heavy. And then we get to the end, and it's just this silly concept of a secret king of America who's been, a lineage that's been there since the beginning. And I was just like, great. That kind of silly counterpoint really lightened the tone of the book for me. It made me think that it's not going to be such a heavy emotional slog the entire time.
Yeah,
I liked it a lot. I didn't necessarily love that he had the lasso of lies. Didn't love that.
I'm kind of curious to see where that goes.
It's a little too much of the everything in comics has a thing about a thing.
Yeah.
But
is it worth noting? I can cut this. Tom King was at January 6th, not as a participant, but as an observer. Like, he was live tweeting the whole thing from the outside.
He lives like around the corner from the Capitol.
Used to. I don't know that he lives there anymore, and I'm obviously not trying to dox the guy, but like,
well, he's said that many times online.
Yeah, but he was like literally out walking his dog as January 6th was happening, and as a guy who used to be in the CIA, wasn't so scared of what was going on that he wasn't willing to like walk around and take some pictures of just like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah. And there's certainly a sense of that. I just think I was halfway through this issue and I was like, oh man, this is fucking bleak. And then it gets to the end, there's a silly old man on the throne with a crown, and he's the king of America. And I was like, okay, I feel better now about this book and where it might go. And so I think overall I liked it, even if I didn't necessarily love the entire experience of reading all the way through. And I totally agree with you that there's some points where it is a wall of texty, and hopefully he was just getting the exposition out of the way in the first issue, and it's not like that going forward. But as a Wonder Woman comic, and it has not been that good since I really love that one issue of the last new iteration of her where she went to Asgard and hung out with Asgardian gods. That was awesome. It was pick of the week, and that run didn't really live up to the promise of that. The Wonder Woman seems to always buckle under the weight of Wonder Woman, the character. And,
yeah, you've mentioned that before.
And I'm just hoping that this Tom King is enough of a smart writer to not worry about that. But we'll see. I mean, we'll never know. I mean, there's lots of great writers who have crashed against the rocks of Wonder Woman, the book, because it seems to be a hard thing to write. So we'll see. But I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it.
I will give it another issue to see if it finds its stride a little bit more. I didn't hate this, but it was more interesting. It clearly has got some other ideas about how to incorporate Wonder Woman into a DC universe that I'm curious about. And so, I don't know. I think I was also confused at the start because I thought that the initial scene in the pool hall in Montana, I thought that was just like Diana with a blonde wig. I didn't realize that we were dealing with like multiple various Amazonian characters. So
right. Well, yeah, I don't know who that person is, but just another Amazon, I guess.
Just some sort of Amazon we've never seen before.
He's ex-military, ex-CIA, ex-government. He's got a lot of things to say. He lives in Washington, D.C., at least he did. He's got a lot of things to say about the current state of things, and I thought that was interesting, if a little bleak, but it'll be... I mean, and Wonder Woman's always been that kind of character. She's always been... Her character lives in D.C. and, has a boyfriend in the military, so she's always been tied into the government. So I'm curious to see where he goes with this. I'm obviously going to keep reading it. So
she lived at Watergate, according to 1984.
Well, there you go.
Do you know why it's called Watergate?
Why the hotel is called Watergate?
Fun DC fact. Are you ready?
Yeah.
That is where the C&O Canal ends. So there is a gate that lets the canal back into the Potomac, a water gate.
Oh, I thought wasn't it torn down, the hotel?
No, that building's still there. I don't know if it's still a hotel, but like there's definitely like there's definitely a Watergate looking building at the Watergate of the C&O Canal.
Maybe it was the Ambassador Hotel where
I don't know. I've gone back and forth with you on DC geography before. I don't trust you a lick when it comes to DC.
One of those important buildings was torn down. I don't remember which one.
But isn't that neat? The Watergate, like it's the gate that lets the water out.
Sticking with this book or not?
I will give it at least one more issue, but it is. I don't want to say it's on the chopping block, but it is not. I'm not like this issue wasn't the issue to get me hooked, and I would like to be hooked. I would like to have a Wonder Woman book that I'm reading, but I'm not quite there yet. I need to see a little more.
And what's your rating on it? This issue?
That's tough. I would have rather. Are we allowed to say what
the Ambassador Hotel was torn down in 2005? It's where RFK was shot.
Are we allowed to say? Did we say what this was in contention with for Pick of the Week?
It was against the Jack Kirby book.
I would have rather have given a rating to that for I don't know why, but
well, you can't. You got to do this one.
I know. I'm thinking.
I'm gonna give it 3.5 out of 5.
I think I'm down to a 3.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to more. I'm curious. It was a slog. Hopefully it's not a slog. It continues. Hopefully we're done with the wall of text, but we'll see.
And when we there's wall of text because the writer is green and doesn't know to rein it in. Tom King knows. When Tom King puts a wall of text up, he knows that he's putting up a wall of text. And the guy's also a novelist, an accomplished one, a good one. So I'm willing to give him more leeway on that, but I am just admitting as a reader of the book that those wall of text slowed me down and made it getting through the book more of a slog. And I hate to use that term. It's the truth.
I get it. Patreon.com/iFanboy. Every patron can vote to add a book to the rundown, but if you give at the $5 or higher level, one of your rewards is a superpower that is bestowed upon you live on the show. And this week, Ryan is going to do it.
I am. This is the first time hearing of it. Kidding. Joel Rodriguez is the deputizer.
Oh.
Joel Rodriguez can deputize anyone for anything.
And it's legally binding?
It's,
like if it makes you a deputy, you're like
I don't know if legal is the right term, but like you are compelled. Like it's almost more of a psychic thing than a legal thing.
So you're compelled to act in that way, even if legally you're not covered.
Right. So like if Joel needs his car waxed and he says, Connor, I deputize you as official car waxer.
Oh. So it's not always in a law enforcement capacity. It's
anything that is subordinate to things that Joel could do himself, but that he wants some backup.
So is he like Huckleberry Finn or
a little bit? Yeah, yeah. I'm whitewashing this fence. I deputize you as deputy whitewasher. Yeah.
So it's more like he can compel you to work for him.
Yeah, as a deputy, he has to like go through the process. Like it's sort of like a knighthood. Like he's got to he's got to touch the shoulder or whatever.
Interesting. So it's like a low level compulsion power.
Yeah, low level, but also like I feel like there's got to be a little buy-in. Like you have to be interested in the idea that you're being deputized to do first, and then he deputizes you, and you're now. So
if you were at a party at Joel's house, and he was like, "Ryan, I deputize you to go get some more ice," would you have to go get the ice?
No, I think you'd have to make it more formal than that. I say you are now the deputy of ice procurement for the party.
Okay, but you still have to do it.
Right, but when the party's over, my deputization has ended. Like I'm not forever indebted to Joel to go get more ice, but like if he declares that I'm the deputy of ice procurement for the party, then yeah, I gotta take that seriously. I gotta go get that done.
I see.
I'm the deputy.
All right.
He's the deputizer. Well, Julie and I had a long conversation about English words having there's many English nouns that describe a person where there's an and an e.
Okay.
So like
deputizer.
Right. And so like he's the deputizer, everyone around him is the deputizee. Right. And we were trying to come up with examples where that's broken and there aren't two words that actually describe the dual roles, but it's interesting. Maybe it's got me thinking.
All right. Well, thanks for being a patron, Joel Rodriguez. Patreon.com/iFanboy is where you can go do it. Let's look. I think we can sneak in one quick audience question. Can
I deputize you as the iFanboy question asker.
Unlike the typo, Ken J from the Great North of Canada. I was just there a couple weeks ago. I loved it. It was beautiful. My biggest pet peeve about comic book time travel is when people believe they need to race to get back to their own time. It's time travel. Whether it takes you 2 hours or 2 weeks, you can always come back to the exact same time. Or if it's Doctor Doom taking over the world situation, you can come back 10 minutes early and thwart him before he starts his chicanery. What's your biggest comic book pet peeve? I've been thinking about this question for 12 minutes. Or have I? Real quick on time travel.
Yeah, let's get into that for just
I know this email's not about time travel, but I do have a thought about what he said.
As do I.
It's drama.
Right. The character has to be compelled to complete a task.
Right. If you're right. You're totally right. Like all these things, every movie about time travel, Marty McFly tried to beat it in Back to the Future by saying, "Oh, you can just go back," but they have to create drama. It's otherwise, why are we watching or reading it? So,
Marty McFly has to race to get back because the circumstances by which he can go back are at a certain point in his relative future. It's the lightning strike.
No, what I mean is he's sitting there and he goes, well, he's worried about Doc getting shot by the Libyans, but he says, oh, well, I've got a time machine. I can go back whenever. And so that's what they kind of try to deal with it there, but they still has to go back with enough time to make it dramatic. So that's why.
Well, the other side of that coin, I also think is, if Marty McFly spent 2 weeks in the 50s, but then goes back to 10 minutes before he left, now he's lost that 2 weeks of his own body aging, right? And so there's also a sort of,
it's not just relativity. He's just not now 2 weeks older than he was when he left.
I think so. And there's also like the Matthew McConaughey thing of like, if you're traveling relativistically to other people on a different planet or whatever, like your kids are getting older, and every minute you spend on the wave planet is a 7 years you don't get with your kids. So like, yeah, you're in a hurry.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I'm not saying it's wrong to have that pet peeve, but the story's got to be dramatic, so they got to do something. Biggest comic pet peeve. Have you listened to the show? I got like a million of them.
I think it's pizza.
Well, you know what? There haven't been a lot of bad pizza problems lately. But if you'd asked me a year ago, it definitely said the way people draw pizza. I'm trying to think what my biggest one is. I've got a lot. Do you have one that comes to you to your head immediately?
The one that I come to immediately, if we're talking about like mainstream superhero comics, I think trying to make the costumes look like the movies. I'm really tired of that. Like I just don't like I don't think it serves the comics at all.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily say the movies' influence in comics is probably my biggest pet peeve, or the movies / TV. But I think what you're saying is right, because this is a fantastical world bound by no real world logic or rules. So you can draw any kind of crazy costume you want that wouldn't work in the real world, and it's more fun that way than a bunch of people in outfits that can be easily cosplayed. So,
I think another one for me would be. Sorry,
no, go ahead.
Another one for me would be.
People have 18 years of hearing my pet peeves, so you can take some time.
It's Biff Bam Pow comics aren't for kids anymore. We say that, we joke about that, we lament that. We also recognize that like there's a ton of YA graphic novels coming out, and there are comics made specifically for kids. And so like the majority of mainstream comics are being made for adult men, right? Mm-hmm. Yet when there was like an issue of Action Comics where Clark and Pa Kent were leaning on the fence having a beer, and there was a whole big hubbub where like we had to go and it had to be photoshopped that they're having root beer.
What? What happened? When did that happen?
It was a while ago. But I feel like that's consistently a thing where it's like we can't accept that
it can't acknowledge these are not for kids. Even
or just that these are adults who do adult things. Like my kid sees me have a beer. Like he's 2 years old. He understands that there's leche and there's agua, because my kid goes to a Spanish language daycare, so he calls those things leche and agua. And then there's mama juice and daddy juice, right? Like, and he gets that like he's not supposed to have those, and it's okay. He's at 2 years old. He's old enough to recognize that adults sometimes have beverages that he can't have. And so it is a pet peeve of mine that we're not allowed to pretend that a hardworking Kansas farmer can end his day sharing a beer with his son. And also, the beer will have no effect on Clark. So it's not even like he's setting a bad example. He can't get drunk.
That's not a bad one. I mean, like, there's plenty. I've got certainly, lots of costume pet peeves. Like this. So, for instance, on this week's Booksplode show, we talked about the coloring of the 90s Superman costume and how it was bright blue and red. And Josh said, I finally understand why you're always complaining about how they color Superman sometimes, because he just pops off the page. And then this very week on the World's Finest comic, Superman's costume was teal. Mm-hmm. It was red and teal. And I was like, he's practically wearing a green costume. And it's just, I don't understand things like that. I've got lots of pet peeves. Everyone knows what my pet peeves are. Somebody used to keep a spreadsheet of them. One of the listeners, I don't know, I have the link somewhere. But I just don't understand giving Superman a teal costume. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Beyond the fact that, like, completely losing the core concept of most of these characters now. Batman completely lost the core concept of Batman. All these things are just...
I also thought you made a lot of sense on a show a couple weeks back where you talked about Falcon Cap's costume, and the primary color of Falcon Cap's costume is white.
Yes.
And that's wrong. That's incorrect for Captain America.
Yeah, I just, as someone, I think visually, and my mom was an artist, I have a little bit of artistic ability. I just think that way. And when you see some, every character, you close your eyes in there, and if you picture them, a color pops into, at least in my head. And Captain America, even though he's red, white, and blue, it's blue. The costume is mostly blue.
But it's not. I mean, you say it's red, white, and blue. It's the color that pops in your mind. That is what it means for them to be icons. Like, it's iconography.
And so to change it to white, it's like if I see him run past the screen, now my brain no longer registers that's Captain America. It's like, wait, who? It's just the color wise, it just doesn't make any sense for there's a lot. We have to stop because I just keep going. But
no, but I think my pet peeve is that characters who are adults in the comic books adults. Aren't allowed to be adults. Like, as far as we know, Peter Parker is still a virgin. Because they've retconned his marriage. They've retconned his marriage. No,
and the marriage still happened. They just forgot about it.
Weird. Well, that's even weirder. So he's psychically a virgin, physically a non-virgin.
Was he not sleeping with Black Cat?
I don't know. They kind of I think they're a little coy about that.
You want them to show more superhero sex, is what you're saying. You want confirmation whether or not who is a virgin is not a virgin. That's your pet peeve.
I want a superhero virginal registration act. No, I don't want that. I want comics to be able to admit I don't need like full Watchmen level Archimedes.
Like what you said. It sounded like you wanted pornography.
You're making it sound like that's what I said. But what I'm trying to say is I want the characters to be allowed to act like real human adults who are not perfect bastions of virtue and occasionally have a drink and have a fun, sexy time. That's one of the reasons I've been enjoying the Nightwing run so much is that he's having fun with Barbara Gordon and it's great.
I think the most important thing to note in this conversation is that you, me, Ken, anyone reading these books who has these passionate takes or pet peeves, it's because you really care and love the characters and what you're reading and all. Like, if you didn't care, you wouldn't have these conversations. And so I think that's great. I think it shows everyone's passion for the medium and the characters and everything. Thanks for writing in, Ken. Contact at iFanboy.com is where Ken wrote in. You can also write in for a Mediasplode show, put Mediasplode into the subject line, and we can do that on that show. We just got a bunch of interesting ones for Mediasplode, which we'll try to get into the next episode. Quick plugs. This past week, we've been talking about it on the show several times, but right behind the show in the feed, Josh and I released our Booksplode, where we reviewed the Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Edition, which is a giant collection of the Death of Superman story plus another miniseries. We talked about that. It was Josh's first time ever reading that Death of Superman story. No, yeah, he was out at that point. He didn't come back until Morrison's JLA, so he was gone at that point from comics. So we talked about that aspect of it. We talked about my memories of buying it and getting gouged at the comic store trying to buy it when it came out. Really fun discussion. Josh is sick with COVID, so it's not as long as we normally go, but he was starting to fade. We didn't know it was COVID at the time, but he was having a hard time. So anyway, it was a good discussion, though. It was a good, and we really enjoyed it, the book and talking about it. This coming week should be, I don't know if it will happen because of Josh's illness, but we're supposed to have our Mediasplode this coming week. We'll see. We'll see what happens. The September Mediasplode may in fact come out in October if Josh can't handle recording. So we'll play that one by ear, and hopefully it'll happen. But I really want to talk about is the Pick of the Week 900 live episode. I talked about this last week. It's coming. This is 897, so 3 more episodes until our live 900th spectacular. Send in your emails to get on the show, because if you're a longtime listener, you know that we talk about the Pick of the Week book, we talk about the Patron Pick, and then we spend the rest of the time, the rest of the 3 hours answering your emails. So if you want to get them in, email contact@ifanboy.com, put 900 in the subject line, and the deadline to get them in is end of day October 11th, because we're recording Thursday, October 12th at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. You'll find links to watch the recording that day. They'll be on our YouTube page, and there'll be links on ifanboy.com. But get those emails in. I always like seeing the early birds, the people who email in as soon as that show came out last Sunday. I will say this: if you pay attention, the earlier your email, the better chance we're going to answer it, because in the beginning we answer them all in order. As basically they go in the script in the order they came in. And in the beginning, we get them all. And then about an hour and a half in, we start skipping, not because they're not good emails, but just because we realize we're running out of time. So the first half emails tend to always get in the show. The second half, it's a toss of the coin whether or not they'll make it, just because of the way it goes. So if you want to make sure you get your email on the show, get it in early. Contact@ifanboy.com, 900 in subject line. Get them in by October 11th. October 12th is the live show. I realize Thursday is tough, but hopefully you'll be there to watch a little bit of it. It's always more fun with people in the chat room, and we appreciate everyone who comes to watch. Ryan, is Science Sort of still happening?
Yeah, I mean, yes, and forever in our hearts. I don't have a new episode to promote, but I will promote. Last time I was on the show, you encouraged me to promote episode from the archives that people may not have heard, so I'm going to do that again. Okay. Episode 316, Message in a Rocket. It is my second or third interview with Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, cool.
It was about when his new book came out, Letters from an Astrophysicist, where he was basically receiving and writing correspondence to people who were sending him letters, which is a cool idea for a book from a sort of public intellectual. But we also actually, I think in ways that are relevant to what's happening in the world now, he and I really talked a lot about what he's doing on social media, what he's doing on Twitter, why, how does he learn from when he makes mistakes in public? Mm-hmm. I thought that was interesting. Why he decided to work for the Bush administration. He's a liberal guy. It doesn't share their political values, but felt that it was important for him to serve. So there's some interesting things there. And then the highlight of the episode is we do a dramatic reading of there was a thing written, was written on, I'm trying to remember the name of the website. The website doesn't even exist anymore, but this guy wrote this theoretical pitch meeting for Wishbone, the TV show. Do you remember Wishbone?
No.
I bet your wife knows about it. Ask her. But Wishbone was a PBS show about a Jack Russell Terrier who was obsessed with classic literature, and they would have reenactments of the classic literature with the Jack Russell Terrier dressed up as the main character. So it's a Jack Russell Terrier who is Robin Hood.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I definitely don't remember this whatsoever. I was in college when this came out. So.
But it's an insane show because it's about a dog who loves literature. So the pitch meeting thing is all about these writers trying to pitch the idea that this dog is really into classic literature, and the executives trying to understand what they mean. And we on the show, for some reason, decided to do a dramatic reading of that article where we all played the different roles. So it's yeah, it was a moment.
So how can people find that? What episode number is it?
316.
At sciencesortof.com?
Sciencesortof.com, yeah.
It's also important to know that all dogs like literature. You can find your library over our library. It's not yours, it's ours.
Well, it's theirs if they download
It's everyone's, but it's ours. But it's everyone's. It's for the people. The library of over 1,300 shows are over at ifanboy.com. You can find all of them there. You can also find them on our podcast feed. They're all there for you to listen to. And follow us at iFanboy Comics on Instagram to find out what the pick of the week is before the show comes out, and to sometimes find the best of the week in panels feature if I'm around. And individually, we are CS Kilpatrick on Instagram, J.A. Flanagan on Instagram, Ryan Haupt on Instagram. You're also still on X, I believe.
No, I haven't posted on either platform in some time.
Well, individually, that's where you can find us. And then I'm just going to fly through this. Subscribe to youtube.com/ifanboy. You can find our old video shows, and we post this show every week. And consider leaving us a review or star rating wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you can rate them, please consider doing so. It helps people find the show. We appreciate that. Thank you, Ryan, for stepping in Josh may or may not, survive this, and we'll do the funeral episode if that's.
It worked out because I think the calendar was a little needed to be rejiggered, but fortunately, I was planning to be here whether you were planning to have me or not. So we did it.
Thanks for being here. I appreciated it. Thanks everyone listening. I appreciate you. And until next week, I'm Connor.
Wait, you appreciate me or you appreciate them?
No, I said I appreciate you coming, and I appreciate the listeners, both.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure everyone's being appreciated. I appreciate you, Connor, and I also appreciate the listeners. And also remind the listeners that the opening lines of the theme song for Wishbone were, "What's the story, Wishbone? Tell me your dream."
Now we got to pay them a licensing fee.
It's PBS.